I never thought hiring a private chef would turn into one of the most bewildering and honestly thrilling experiences of my life. I mean, sure, I'm not exactly Gordon Ramsay in the kitchen, but I'm not clueless either. So when my work schedule got insane and I realized my microwave dinners were becoming less lazy gourmet and more charred regrets, I decided it was time to bring in some professional help. What I did not expect was that the guy the first hired would end up serving me a whole lot more than just food. I live in a cramped but cozy apartment in downtown Seattle, right smack in the middle of a neighborhood that's either buzzing with startup energy or drowning in endless rain, depending on the week. My job as a graphic designer means long hours, late nights, and a decent amount of takeout that my waistline and wallet both resent. So when I posted that ad looking for a private chef, I thought it would be a straightforward gig. Cook me some decent meals, keep me fed, and keep it professional. Simple. That's why I met Leo. From his first message, Leo sounded different from every other applicant. His tone wasn't stiff or overly professional like you usually get. It was casual with a hint of humor that made me feel like I was already chatting with an old friend instead of a stranger pitching his cooking skills. When we finally met, he showed up with a beat-up backpack, a cheeky smile, and an energy that immediately filled the room. He wasn't what I expected. No white chef's jacket, no fancy talk about sous vide or gastronomy. Just a guy who clearly loved food, and maybe a little bit of chaos. Our first meeting was awkward but fun. I told him my usual diet of convenience store sushi and frozen burritos, and he laughed like I'd just confessed to a crime. Then he whipped up this ridiculous dinner from what little I had in my fridge: grilled chicken that was juicy, seasoned just right, and a salad that didn't taste like sad leaves tossed with regret. I was impressed. More than that, I was intrigued. Hiring him wasn't just about the food anymore. There was something about the way he moved around my tiny kitchen, the way he listened when I talked about my life, and how he didn't just cook for me but seemed to want to understand me. I caught myself looking forward to those evenings when he'd come over, curious what he'd come up with next, not just on the plate but in conversation. But then, something weird happened. One night, after a particularly tough day, I got home to find Leo sitting at my small dining table, a bottle of wine open, and this look in his eyes that wasn't about recipes or ingredients. It was like he was about to serve me something I hadn't ordered, but desperately needed. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I was ready for that kind of course. I wanted to tell you how it all went down next, but honestly, the way it unfolded is one of those moments you have to experience to believe. So I'll start from the beginning, because it's not every day a guy you hire to cook ends up feeding your heart in ways you never expected. Leo's sitting there like that wasn't something I was prepared for. It wasn't typical chef showing up early to prep stuff. He looked different. Less the confident guy who could whip up a feast from a can of beans, and more vulnerable. Like he was about to share something, or maybe ask for something, but wasn't sure how to start. I dropped my bag by the door and forced a smile. "Hey, didn't expect company tonight." He shrugged, that easy grin creeping back onto his face. "Yeah, I figured you might need a break from cooking, or maybe just from yourself." I raised an eyebrow. "From myself? That sounds ominous." He laughed softly, but there was no teasing in it. Just this quiet understanding, like he saw something in me I hadn't admitted yet. "Look, you've been working crazy hours. You're exhausted. And honestly, you look kind of lonely." That hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I mean, sure, I was lonely, but how does a guy you barely know say that so casually, like it's obvious? "I'm fine," I muttered, trying to sound casual, even though my throat tightened. "Yeah, that's what everyone says." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Listen, I'm not just your chef. I'm someone who's been there. Work's a grind, life gets messy, and sometimes you just need more than a microwave meal to get through it." There was this raw honesty in his voice that cracked through my usual defenses. I found myself sitting down opposite him instead of just standing awkwardly by the door. "So what? You're here to save me?" I joked, but the smile was genuine. He shook his head, eyes warm. "No, man. I'm here because I want to be. Because you deserve more than what you're settling for. On your plate and in your life." That caught me off guard. I wasn't used to people saying things like that to me, especially not someone I just hired to cook dinner. For a moment, we just sat there, the city's night hum leaking through the windows, and the half-empty bottle of wine between us. Then he pushed the bottle toward me. "Drink?" he offered. I glanced at the glass, then back at him. "Yeah, why not?" We uncorked the bottle, and as the wine filled our glasses, the conversation started to flow. Slowly at first, then with more confidence. He told me about his life before becoming a private chef, how he bounced around kitchens in New York, chasing dreams that felt bigger than the city could hold. How he'd moved west because he wanted a fresh start, away from all the noise. I shared bits about my own struggles, the endless deadlines, the creeping isolation, the way my social life had shrunk to a couple of text messages a week. It was strange, but also kind of liberating to admit it out loud. At some point, the wine and stories blurred the lines between chef and client, and it felt like we were just two guys in a tiny apartment trying to figure out how to connect. Then, Leo did something unexpected. He reached out and touched my hand, just a quick brush, but enough to send a thrill through me. "Hey," he said softly, "I'm here, not just to cook. If you want, I'm around." My heart skipped. I wanted to believe him, but part of me was scared. Scared of what it meant to let someone in, to trust, to want more. "Leo," I said, voice a little shaky, "this is kind of fast." He smiled, that same calm, reassuring smile from the first night. Yeah, but sometimes the fast lane's where you find the real stuff. That night, we didn't go any further than that touch and the lingering looks. But after he left, I lay awake thinking about what had just happened. Was this just a one-time thing? A moment of shared vulnerability? Or was it something more? The next day, when Leo showed up with groceries and a plan for dinner, things felt different. He was more relaxed, less guarded. And so was I. While he cooked, we talked about music, movies, the little weird quirks that made us who we were. The way his eyes lit up when he described a favorite dish, or the way I caught myself smiling more than usual, there was this unspoken tension growing between us, subtle but electric, like the kind of anticipation right before a storm breaks. Dinner that night was incredible, of course. Flavors I didn't know I was missing. But it wasn't just the food. It was the way Leo looked at me over the rim of his glass, the way our hands almost touched when he passed me a plate, the quiet moments when the noise of the city and our worries faded away. I realized then that hiring a private chef had been easy compared to what was about to come next. Because suddenly, I wasn't just hungry for good food. I was hungry for connection, for understanding, maybe even for something like love. And Leo? He was serving me something I'd been starving for without even knowing it. I'm still not sure where this is headed, or how we got here so fast. But I do know one thing. Sometimes, the best meals and the best relationships are the ones you don't order. They just show up, unexpected and messy and perfect all at once. And honestly, I can't wait to see what the next course looks like. The days after that night felt like the start of something I hadn't even dared to imagine. Leo's presence in my apartment became a kind of anchor I didn't know I needed. He'd come in, toss his backpack in the corner, and immediately start plotting what we'd eat next, always with that mischievous glint in his eye, like he had a secret he couldn't wait to share. But beyond the food, there was this slow, steady building of, connection? Like we were weaving ourselves into each other's routines without pushing or rushing it. I'd catch him watching me sometimes, just quietly, and I'd feel that strange flutter in my chest, like some new part of me was waking up. One afternoon, a few days after our wine night, I was working from home, headphones in, trying to meet a deadline when Leo popped his head into the living room. "Hey, you're still alive?" he teased, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. I pulled out my earbuds and smiled. "Barely. You're early. What's up?" He grinned, holding up a bag of groceries. "Got inspired. Figured I'd get a jump on dinner and maybe drag you away from that screen for a bit." I hesitated, then closed the laptop. "Sounds like a plan." He set to work in the kitchen, humming something I didn't recognize, and I watched him move with this effortless confidence that made me think, yeah, this guy could probably run a kitchen blindfolded. But then he caught me staring and just winked. While he chopped vegetables, I poured us both some sparkling water. "So, do you always just show up unannounced at clients' places?" I joked. He shrugged, grinning. "Only the interesting ones." I laughed, and just like that, the afternoon melted into something warm and familiar. We talked about everything and nothing: favorite childhood memories, dumb movies we loved but didn't admit to anyone, what we wanted if we ever left the city. All the little things you share when you're starting to feel close, but aren't quite there yet. Then, as he plated the food, he glanced at me and said, "You know, I don't usually do this whole chef-come-friend thing, but with you, it feels different." "Different how?" I asked, curious. "Like I'm not just here to feed your stomach, but maybe feed your soul, too." If that doesn't sound too cheesy, I smiled, feeling a little embarrassed but also kind of relieved. "I'm glad you're here." That night, after dinner, I found myself lingering near the kitchen while Leo cleaned up. There was something about his presence, easy, genuine, that made me want to say more, but words got caught somewhere between my heart and my mouth. Instead, I just leaned against the counter and said, "Thanks for today." He looked up, eyes soft. "Anytime." For weeks, this rhythm continued. Leo cooked, we talked, and the awkward edges of new friendships started smoothing out into something warmer. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more bubbling beneath the surface, something unspoken hanging in the air between us. One evening, after a long day that felt heavier than usual, I found myself sitting on the couch staring at my phone, debating whether to text a friend or just hole up in silence. Leo appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Hey," he said gently, setting one down beside me. "Rough day?" I nodded, the exhaustion suddenly pressing down hard. "Yeah, everything just feels off." He sat next to me, close enough that I could feel the heat from his body. "Want to talk about it?" I hesitated, then slowly opened up about the stress at work, the creeping loneliness that no amount of busy work could fix, and the fear that I was stuck in a rut I didn't know how to escape. As I spoke, Leo listened, not just hearing me, but really listening. When I finished, he reached out, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear with a tenderness that made my breath hitch. "You're not alone," he said softly. "I'm here, whatever you need." I looked into his eyes and felt something shift, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, I could let someone in without losing myself. Without really thinking, I leaned in, resting my forehead against his. It was a quiet, shaky moment, full of unspoken promises and the weight of all we hadn't said yet. Leo smiled, that same reassuring smile from our first night together, and whispered, "We'll figure it out, together." That night, we didn't rush anything. No grand declarations or lightning strikes, just 2 people sitting close, wrapped in a comfort that felt like home. Over the next few days, our relationship grew in small, meaningful ways. We learned each other's rhythms, how I liked my coffee, the way he talked about his favorite ingredients, the little quirks that made us who we were. One morning, I woke up to the smell of fresh bread and coffee. Leo was in the kitchen, humming as he prepared breakfast. When I stumbled out of bed, bleary-eyed and still half asleep, he smiled and handed me a plate with pancakes stacked high, drizzled with syrup. "Good morning," he said. "Thought you could use a proper start." I sat down at the table, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the food. "This is amazing. You always make mornings better." He shrugged, clearly pleased. "Guess I'm full of surprises." As the weeks turned into a month, the lines between client, chef, and something more blurred. I caught myself imagining him there when I got home, looking forward to the meals, but even more to the company. One night, after a particularly delicious dinner, I asked, "So, what made you want to be a private chef, especially for someone like me?" Leo leaned back, thoughtful. "I wanted to create something real, not just food, but moments, connections. I've done plenty of gigs where it was all about the show, the ego. But here, it's different. It feels honest." I nodded, feeling that same honesty rising in me. "Yeah, me too." Then, without warning, he reached across the table and took my hand. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "I'm glad we met. I'm glad I got to serve you more than just dinner. And honestly, I felt the same, because sometimes the best meals aren't the ones you plan. They're the ones that catch you by surprise, that change the way you see everything. And in that moment, I realized Leo was doing exactly that. Not just serving me food, but serving me a chance at something real. After that night, things started to feel like we were moving into uncharted territory. The easy rhythms of chef and client were fading, and in their place was something messier, warmer, and way more complicated. Honestly, it was both exciting and terrifying all at once. Leo began to linger more after his cooking sessions. At first, it was just a few extra minutes here and there, finishing up the dishes, chatting about music or books or some random thing on the news. But gradually, he'd pull up a chair or flop down on my couch, and suddenly, my apartment didn't feel so empty anymore. There was one particular night that stands out. I'd had a brutal day at work, a project that went sideways, a boss who was impossible to please, the kind of stress that sticks to your skin and won't let go. I came home drained, expecting the usual silence and microwave dinner waiting for me. Instead, Leo was there, sleeves rolled up, stirring a pot of something that smelled like it could fix whatever was broken in me. "Hey," he said without looking up. "I figured you needed a proper meal. Not that sad frozen stuff you've been surviving on." I laughed weakly and sank down on the couch. "You have no idea." He finally turned, catching my eyes with a softness I hadn't seen before. "Then let me try." That night, as I ate the food he made, it was like the weight of the day lifted bit by bit. But it wasn't just the flavors, though they were incredible. It was the way he cared. The way he showed up when I felt like disappearing. After dinner, we sat close on the couch, the city lights spilling through the windows. I wasn't sure what to say, so I just let the quiet fill the space between us. Then Leo reached out and took my hand again. "It's okay to let people in," he said quietly. "Even if it scares you." That hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't usually the type to let my guard down, but with him, it felt different, safe somehow. I squeezed his hand back. "I'm trying." And he smiled, that slow, genuine smile that made my chest tighten. Over the next couple of weeks, things shifted even more. We started sharing little parts of our lives outside of the kitchen. I met his dog, this goofy golden retriever who immediately decided my lap was the best spot in the world. He met my small circle of friends, who were instantly charmed by his easy humor and warmth. One afternoon, we went for a walk in the park. It was rainy Seattle, of course, so we had umbrellas and shared a scarf when the wind picked up. We talked about everything and nothing, like we'd known each other forever. At one point, Leo stopped and looked at me seriously. "Do you ever think about what this is?" he asked. I blinked, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" I said. "Us. This. Whatever it is. I don't want to scare you off or anything, but I'm curious where you see it going." I took a deep breath. To be honest, I'd been avoiding that question because I wasn't sure what to say. But looking into his eyes, I realized I wanted to try. "I don't know exactly," I admitted, "but I want to find out. With you." He smiled, relief flashing across his face. Then, before I could stop myself, I reached out and pulled him close for a kiss. It was gentle at first, like testing the waters, but quickly deepened into something I hadn't realized I'd been craving: warmth, connection, and a sense of belonging. When we finally pulled apart, Leo rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "I've wanted that for a while." That night when I walked him to the door, we stood there longer than either of us planned, reluctant to say goodbye. I felt a mix of nerves and happiness swirling inside me, like I was standing on the edge of something new and terrifying and beautiful all at once. Leo reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. "Hey," he said softly, "thank you for letting me in." I smiled, heart pounding. "Thank you for showing up." He leaned in for one more quick kiss, then stepped into the night. I closed the door and leaned against it, stunned by how much had changed in just a few short weeks. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and something I couldn't quite place. I stumbled into the kitchen, still half asleep, and found Leo there, humming as he flipped pancakes. "You're early," I said, smiling. He grinned. "I couldn't wait to see you." We ate breakfast together, talking about plans for the weekend, and laughing like we'd known each other forever. For the first time in a long time, my apartment felt like a home, not just a place to crash after work. As Leo finished cleaning up, he looked at me with that familiar mischievous glint. So, he said, "Think you're ready to let me cook for you indefinitely? I promise to keep surprising you." I laughed and nodded. Definitely. Because I knew, with him, it wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about the moments, the connection, the unexpected love that had slowly crept into my life and changed everything. And honestly, I wasn't ready to say no, I can't lie. Having Leo around full-time was a pretty big adjustment. I mean, I'm used to being on my own, doing my own thing, keeping my space and schedule neat and predictable. But with him here, the apartment felt alive in a way it hadn't before, like it was breathing with us. And honestly, it was kind of amazing. One evening, a couple of weeks after he officially became my private chef, and unofficially way more than that, we ended up sprawled on the couch after dinner. The rain was tapping gently against the window, and the soft glow of the city lights mixed with the warm flicker of a candle on the coffee table. Leo was telling me about this recipe he'd been working on, a kind of fusion between his grandmother's cooking and flavors he'd picked up from the markets out west. I was halfway through a glass of wine, watching the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about food, and it hit me how much I'd missed having someone who wasn't just in my peripheral, but really there. I laughed at something he said, and he grinned, this playful sparkle in his gaze. "You know," he said, nudging me with his shoulder, "you're kind of a tough customer to impress with your picky tastes." I pretended to be offended. "Hey, I'm just discerning." He shook his head, still smiling. "No, you're just stubborn." We sat like that for a minute, the kind of comfortable silence that only develops between people who are starting to know each other deeply. Then I blurted out something I'd been thinking about for a while, but hadn't dared to say. "So, where do you see all this going? Us, I mean." Leo's grin softened, and he looked at me like I just asked the most important question in the world. "I don't have it all figured out," he said honestly. "But I know I want to keep showing up. For you, for this, whatever it becomes." I nodded, relief washing over me. "Yeah, me too." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of small moments that felt huge. Lazy Sunday mornings with pancakes and laughter, cooking experiments that sometimes failed spectacularly, but always ended with us sharing a bottle of wine and ridiculous stories, and quiet nights where we just sat close, no need for words. One night, after we'd watched some terrible horror movie that had us both rolling our eyes, Leo turned to me and said, "I think it's time you meet my world." I raised an eyebrow. "Your world?" "Yeah, the people I grew up with, the city I left behind. I think it's important you see where I come from." I agreed, curious but also a little nervous. Meeting someone's past can be a big deal, especially when feelings are involved. A week later, we took a weekend trip down to the small town where Leo grew up. It was nothing like Seattle. Quiet streets, friendly faces, the kind of place where everybody knows your name and your business. Leo led me through it all with a kind of ease that showed he was comfortable here, even if it wasn't where he wanted to stay. We spent the day meeting his family and friends. His mom was warm and welcoming, cooking a huge meal that tasted like home and nostalgia. His childhood friends teased him about his city slicker tendencies, which made him laugh, and me along with him. That weekend, I saw a side of Leo that was tender and complicated, the person shaped by small-town dreams, family expectations, and a fierce desire to carve out his own path. It made me realize how lucky I was to be part of his story now. On the way back to Seattle, we were driving along the highway, the windows down, the wind messing up our hair. Leo reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "You're stuck with me now," he said with that grin I'd come to love. I laughed. I wouldn't have it any other way. Back home, things settled into a new kind of normal. Our relationship wasn't perfect. There were misunderstandings, moments of doubt, and the usual challenges that come with blending two lives. But we faced them together, learning how to communicate, how to compromise, how to love without losing ourselves. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day for both of us, Leo surprised me by ordering in takeout rather than cooking. We ate on the floor, surrounded by pillows and soft music, and as I looked at him, his eyes tired but happy, I realized how much he'd become my home. We talked about the future, the kind of life we wanted to build, the fears we had, and for the first time, I felt hopeful. Because Leo wasn't just my chef or my boyfriend, He was my partner. The guy who showed me that sometimes the most unexpected orders bring the most delicious surprises. And as I leaned into him that night, I knew I was ready for whatever came next, with him by my side. There's this quiet moment I keep coming back to, the kind of moment that doesn't make a scene or come with fireworks, but somehow feels like everything. It was a Sunday morning, the kind that starts slow and gentle, with light filtering through the blinds and the soft hum of the city waking up outside. Leo was in the kitchen, already in his element, making coffee and humming along to some playlist he'd put together. I was still, half under the covers, watching him move around the small apartment like it belonged to both of us now. He caught me staring and grinned, that familiar look that always made my heart skip. "You awake?" "Barely," I said, but I wasn't in any rush to get up. He came over and perched on the edge of the bed, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. "I was thinking," he said softly, "about how far we've come. From me showing up with a backpack and a bag of groceries to this, us." I smiled, realizing how right he was. There was a time I thought I just needed someone to cook for me, someone to fix the chaos of my nights. But what I found with him was so much more. It was someone who saw me, the messy, tired, stubborn parts, and still wanted to stay. "I'm glad it's you," I told him, voice low but steady. "Not just because of the food. Because of everything." He leaned in close, and I felt the warmth of his breath before our lips met in a kiss that was tender and sure, like a promise spoken without words. That morning, we stayed wrapped up in each other, talking about plans. Nothing huge or scary, just simple things. A trip we wanted to take, a recipe we wanted to try, a future where we didn't have to pretend we had it all figured out. It wasn't a perfect story. There were still days that tested us, moments when doubts crept in but those mornings, those quiet celebrations of us, were a reminder that what mattered was the choice to keep showing up, again and again. Looking back, hiring Leo as my private chef was one of the best decisions I ever made. Not because he saved me from bad takeout or taught me how to appreciate a good meal, but because he served me something else entirely, a chance to be seen, to be cared for, and to love without fear. And that's a dish I'll never get tired of.